She adopted a wolf no one dared touch 3 days before the king came to claim him, by sunset. The whole Silver Pine pack had gathered around the old market post, not for trade, not for music, but for the kind of spectacle people pretended was justice when fear made them cruel. A stray wolf stood chained beneath the hanging lanterns, his dark gray fur tangled with pine needles, his silver eyes fixed on the crowd as if he were judging them instead of the other way around. He was enormous, larger than any forest wolf Emily Carter had ever seen, with a proud, battered stillness that made even the strongest warriors keep their distance. Someone had tied a warning ribbon to the post. "Rogue, do not approach." The children hid behind their mothers. The betas whispered. The alphas laughed too loudly, the way men did when they were afraid of something they could not explain. Emily should have stayed at the back. That was where omegas like her belonged in Silverpine, behind shoulders, behind doors, behind every voice that knew how to speak over hers. She was 22, pale-skinned, quiet, and known mostly as the girl who collected broken things, abandoned dogs, wing-damaged owls, old horses no one wanted to feed through winter. The pack called her the stray keeper, and never kindly. To them, mercy was not a gift. It was proof that she had no power worth respecting. But when the wolf lifted his head, Emily felt the noise of the market fall away. His eyes found hers through the crowd, sharp and moonbright, and something inside her chest tightened like a thread being pulled from miles away. He did not beg. He did not whine. He simply stood there with the dignity of a king who had been mistaken for a monster. "Move aside, Emily," one of the guards said when she stepped forward. "This thing is not one of your wounded pets." A few people laughed. Emily heard them, felt the heat rise in her cheeks, felt every old insult settle on her shoulders like cold rain. Too soft, too weak, too foolish to know when something was dangerous. Still, her feet kept moving. The wolf's ears angled toward her. A low growl rolled through him, deep enough to make the lantern flames tremble. But Emily did not stop. She was close enough now to see the rope marks in his fur, the mud on his paws, the quiet exhaustion beneath all that anger. "He's scared," she said. The guard scoffed. "He's a rogue." Emily looked up at him, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. "Then give him to me." Silence struck the market so suddenly that even the wind seemed to pause. Then the laughter came, loud and sharp. An omega, who could barely protect herself, wanted to take home the most dangerous stray Silverpine had seen in years. But Emily did not look at them. She looked only at the wolf. "You don't have to trust me," she whispered, soft enough that only he should have heard. "Just don't give up tonight." And for the first time, since they had chained him there, the wolf stopped growling. Emily paid for the wolf with the only silver she owned, a thin bracelet that had belonged to her mother and a small pouch of coins she had saved from mending coats through the winter. The guard took both with a smile that made the crowd laugh again, then tossed the chain key into the mud at her feet, as if even kindness had to crawl before it could stand. Emily bent down without a word. Her fingers closed around the cold iron key, and for a moment she felt every eye in Silverpine pressing into her back. They expected her to fail. They expected the wolf to lunge, to prove them right, to remind everyone that an omega who loved broken things would eventually be broken by them. But when Emily stepped close to the post, the wolf only watched her. His silver eyes narrowed, his breath misted in the cool evening air. "Easy," she whispered, though she was not sure whether she was speaking to him or to her own shaking hands. The lock clicked open. The chain fell loose with a heavy sound against the dirt. Several people stepped back at once, and someone muttered for the guards to get ready. The wolf rose slowly, towering beside her, his dark fur brushing the sleeve of her faded blue coat. Emily felt the heat of him, the wildness, the warning held in every muscle. Then he turned his head toward the crowd and showed his teeth just enough to make the laughter vanish. "Do not," Emily said softly. The wolf froze. One ear flicked toward her. It was such a small thing that no one else seemed to notice, but Emily did. He had understood her, not like an animal trained to obey, but like a proud man choosing, with great irritation, not to start trouble. She swallowed her fear and reached for the loose chain. "Come on." Grim. The name slipped out before she thought about it. The wolf looked offended. Emily almost smiled. "You look like you hate it. That means it fits." A low rumble moved through his chest, but he followed. Not closely. Not gently. He walked several feet behind her all the way through the market, as if making it very clear that he was not being led by anyone. People parted fast, whispering as Emily passed with her chin lifted and her heart racing. Beyond the last row of shops, the road narrowed into a trail lined with dark pines. Her cabin waited half a mile from the village, small and weathered, with a crooked porch, a roof patched in 3 places, and lantern light glowing in the front window. It was not much, but it was hers. A place where no one laughed unless she allowed them in. Inside, the old rooms smelled of cedar, dried herbs, and rain-soaked wool. Emily set out water, clean cloth, and the last cut of venison she had planned to stretch over 2 dinners. Grim stood in the doorway, refusing to enter, his gaze moving over every corner as if judging the house and finding it disappointing. "It is not a palace," Emily said, hanging her coat by the stove, "but it is warm." At that word, something changed in his eyes. Only for a second. A flicker of recognition, or memory, or pain buried too deep to name. Then he stepped inside, careful not to limp, though Emily could see the stiffness in his left side. She knelt a few feet away and held up the cloth. "I need to clean you up." Grim gave her a flat, silver stare. "Fine," she murmured. "We can do this the difficult way." He huffed, turned his head, and lay down with his back to the wall, as far from her as the room allowed. Emily waited. She had learned long ago that frightened creatures hated being rushed, so she sat on the floor across from him, folded her hands in her lap, and let the quiet settle between them. Outside, Silver Pine's bells began to ring for evening curfew. Inside, the most dangerous wolf in the territory watched an unwanted Omega as if she were the only person in the world who had ever surprised him. By the time the curfew bells faded into the trees, Emily had learned 3 things about Grim. He hated closed doors. He hated being watched. And he hated kindness most of all, when it came too close to pity. He refused the blanket she placed near him, ignored the bowl of water until she turned her back, and stared at the venison as if accepting food from an Omega might damage his pride beyond repair. Emily pretended not to notice when he finally ate. She sat at the small table by the stove, grinding dried yarrow and sweet pine into a salve the color of pale honey. The cabin was quiet, except for the soft pop of firewood and the slow scrape of Grim moving in the corner whenever his injured side bothered him. She knew better than to rush him. Wild things did not heal faster because someone meant well. They healed when they believed they were safe. Outside, Silver Pine settled under a thin silver moon. The village lights blinked through the trees half a mile away, warm and distant, belonging to people who had never once wondered whether Emily had enough firewood, enough food, enough courage to keep living on the edge of everyone else's concern. She had been 6 when her mother taught her to wrap a broken wing, 12 when the pack started sending unwanted animals to her door, 16 when she realized they were not asking for help. They were getting rid of reminders that weakness existed. The strange thing was, Emily never hated them for it. Hate felt heavy. Mercy was easier to carry. "I know what they see when they look at you," she said quietly, not turning around. Grim's ears lifted. "They see danger because it makes them feel powerful to name something before they understand it." She stirred the salve once more, then let it cool. They do the same thing with me." A low sound came from the corner, not quite a growl. Emily smiled faintly. "Yes, I know. You are very terrifying." Grim exhaled through his nose as if deeply insulted. For the first time that night, the tight knot in Emily's chest loosened. She took a clean cloth, dipped it in warm water, and moved closer on her knees, stopping several feet away. "I am going to clean the mud from your side. You can glare at me the whole time if that helps." His silver eyes fixed on her hand. The room felt suddenly smaller, filled with the quiet pressure of his attention. Emily held still. Her pulse tapped hard in her throat, but she did not pull back. Slowly, almost grudgingly, Grim lowered his head to his paws. Permission, not surrender. Emily accepted it as the gift it was. She cleaned him gently, working around the sore places, careful not to tug at tangled fur. He flinched once, and she stopped at once. "Sorry," she whispered. His gaze flicked to her face, sharp and searching, as if apologies were a language he had forgotten. When she finished, she spread the salve over the swollen skin and wrapped it with a soft strip of linen. Only then did she notice the mark beneath his fur, half hidden near his shoulder, a pale crescent crossed by 3 tiny stars. Emily's fingers froze. Every child in Silverpine knew that symbol. It belonged to the royal bloodline of Blackwood. Before she could breathe, Grim rose so fast the floorboards creaked, placing his body between Emily and the window. Far beyond the trees, a horn sounded from the direction of the village. Not curfew, not ceremony, a search call. Grim's eyes glowed silver in the dark, and Emily understood with a cold rush of fear that someone was looking for him. The second horn rolled over the forest like thunder, trapped beneath the trees. Emily rose so quickly her chair scraped the floor, but Grim moved before she could reach the lantern. His large body crossed the cabin in silence, and with one nudge of his shoulder, he pushed the front door shut. Not slammed, not panicked, closed with the certainty of someone who understood pursuit. Emily stood in the dim firelight, her hands still scented with herbs, staring at the pale royal mark half hidden beneath his fur. The crescent and 3 stars, the Blackwood crest. She had seen it only on tribute papers, palace notices, and the black banners carried by royal messengers when the Alpha King sent word across the northern packs. No stray should have worn that symbol. No rogue should have survived with it. "What are you?" she whispered. Grim looked back at her, silver eyes bright and unreadable. Another horn sounded, closer this time, followed by the distant barking of search hounds. Emily's stomach tightened. If Silverpine found him here, they would not ask why she had saved him. They would call her a liar, a threat, a foolish Omega meddling in royal matters. She crossed to the window and lifted the curtain just enough to see torchlight flickering between the pines. 3, maybe 4 riders, still a quarter-mile out but moving steadily toward her cabin. At their lead was Mason Vale, one of Silverpine's senior enforcers, a broad-shouldered man who had always treated Emily's kindness as a flaw he was waiting to punish. "They are coming here," she said. Grim's lip lifted, but the sound that came from him was not rage. It was warning. Emily turned from the window and forced herself to think. Her mother's old storm cellar sat beneath the pantry, dry, narrow, and hidden under a loose floor panel. She had used it to shelter frightened animals during hard winters. Never anything this large, never anything royal. "You have to hide." Prim stared at her as if the suggestion offended him. "Yes, I know. You are mysterious and proud and probably hate small spaces, but unless you can explain that mark in perfect English, you are going under the floor." He did not move. Emily stepped closer, voice dropping. "Please." That one word changed him. The stubborn line of his body softened, just slightly, as if her fear reached a place command never could. He followed her to the pantry, ducking his head beneath the low beam. Emily pulled back the rug, lifted the panel, and revealed the dark steps below. Grim gave the opening a look of deep personal betrayal. "I will make it up to you," she promised. "Extra venison, maybe a less terrible name?" He huffed once, then descended into the cellar with all the dignity a massive wolf could manage, while squeezing into a space clearly built for potatoes and preserves. Emily lowered the panel, dragged the rug back into place, and had just enough time to wipe her hands on her skirt before a fist struck the door. "Emily Carter," Mason called from outside. "Open up. We are searching every home near the eastern woods." Emily walked to the door with her heart pounding so loudly she was sure the whole pack could hear it. She opened it only halfway. Cold air rushed in, carrying pine, horses, and suspicion. Mason stood on her porch with 2 guards behind him, their torches throwing restless shadows over his face. His gaze moved past her shoulder. "You brought home a wolf from the market." Emily kept her hand steady on the door. "I brought home an injured animal." Mason smiled without warmth. "Then you will not mind if we look around." Beneath the floorboards, not a sound came from Grim, not a breath, not a shift of weight. Emily lifted her chin, small and pale in the doorway, and said, "You already took my bracelet, my coins, and my dignity in front of the whole village. You do not get to take my home, too." For the first time in her life, Mason Vale had no answer ready. Mason's silence lasted only a few seconds, but to Emily, it felt like the whole night had stopped breathing. The torchlight moved across his face, catching the tightness in his jaw, the irritation of a man who had expected her to shrink and found her standing instead. Behind him, one of the guards shifted his weight, glancing past Emily toward the warm glow of the cabin. The old fear rose in her chest, familiar and bitter. She had been taught to step aside from men like Mason, to apologize before anyone even accused her, to make herself small enough that their pride could pass through the doorway unbruised. But beneath her feet, hidden below the pantry floor, Grim was silent because he trusted her. That thought steadied her more than courage ever had. Mason leaned closer. "You are making a mistake." Emily kept her voice low. "I have made plenty. Saving something that needed help was not one of them." His eyes narrowed. For a moment, she thought he would force his way in anyway. Then one of the horses outside snorted and pulled back, ears flattened toward the dark tree line. The search hounds began to whine. Mason turned sharply. Far out in the woods, something moved through the mist, not seeing clearly, only felt. A pressure rolling between the pines like a storm without wind. The guards felt it too. Their faces lost color. Emily felt it in her bones. A deep command older than rank, older than fear, calling to every wolf-blooded creature in Silverpine. Beneath the floorboards. Grim answered with one quiet breath. Mason stepped back from the door, trying to look calm and failing. "The Royal Patrol is near," one guard whispered. "That is not our patrol," Mason said, but his voice had changed. He looked at Emily again, suspicion fighting with unease. "If that beast causes trouble, the council will hold you responsible." "Then the council knows where I live," Emily said. Mason stared at her as if seeing someone he had overlooked for years and not liking the discovery. Finally, he turned away. The guards followed him down the porch steps, their torches bobbing through the trees until the darkness swallowed them. Emily closed the door, slid the bolt into place, and stood with her forehead against the wood, shaking only after they were gone. For a long moment she could not move, then a soft scrape came from the pantry. Emily hurried over, lifted the panel, and found Grim glaring up from the cellar with the expression of a king who had been deeply insulted by root vegetables. A laugh escaped her before she could stop it, small and breathless. "I know," she whispered. "That was awful." He climbed out carefully, his shoulder brushing her arm. This time he did not move away. His fur was warm against her sleeve, his presence heavy and strangely comforting in the quiet cabin. Emily looked down at him, at the hidden mark beneath the bandage, at the silver eyes that seemed too human in the firelight. "They are not just looking for a rogue, are they?" Grim held her gaze. Outside, the unseen pressure in the forest faded, but not completely. Somewhere beyond the pines, someone powerful was searching, and Emily understood with a chill that Silverpine was only the beginning. Grim stepped closer, lowered his head, and touched his muzzle gently to her hand. Not a command, not a warning, a promise. The second day began with frost on the porch rail and whispers moving faster than sunlight through Silverpine. By breakfast, every shopkeeper on Main Street had heard that Emily Carter was hiding a cursed rogue in her cabin. By noon, someone had tied a strip of black ribbon to her fence, the old pack warning for danger. Emily found it while carrying water from the pump, its dark fabric snapping in the wind like a quiet accusation. Grim stood behind her in the doorway, his bandaged shoulder lifted, his silver eyes fixed on the road. He had not slept much, neither had she. Every time a branch cracked outside, he rose. Every time Emily shivered, he moved closer to the stove, but never quite close enough to admit he was doing it for her. "They are afraid of you," she said, untying the ribbon and folding it in her palm. Grim gave a low huff. "Fine. They are afraid of both of us." That earned her a sideways look, so offended she nearly smiled. The day passed in small, careful tasks. Emily changed his bandage, warmed broth on the stove, and pretended not to notice when Grim rested his chin near her boot while she sorted herbs. She should have been terrified. Instead, the cabin felt less empty with him in it, as if the walls had learned how to breathe. Yet the mark on his shoulder would not leave her thoughts. The crescent and 3 stars. The royal crest. It glimmered faintly beneath the salve whenever moonlight touched it, too precise to be a scar, too old to be ordinary. On the third morning, Emily woke before dawn to the sound of Grim pacing. The fire had burned low, and the cabin was washed in blue-gray light. He stood near the window, tense and silent, staring toward the village. Beyond the trees, Silverpine's chapel bell began to ring, slow and formal. Not curfew, not warning, a summons. Emily crossed the room and found a folded notice pinned to her porch with the council seal pressed into red wax. Her name sat in the center, written in a hand that made even paper feel cold. She was ordered to appear at Moon Court by sundown to answer for sheltering an unidentified wolf within pack territory. Failure to appear would be treated as defiance. Emily read it twice, though the words did not change. Grim came up beside her, so close his fur brushed her skirt. "I know," she whispered. "They want me scared." The mark on his shoulder began to glow. At first it was only a silver thread beneath the bandage, then a soft light spreading through the linen, gentle and bright as moonlight on snow. Emily reached for him before she thought better of it. The moment her fingers touched the mark, the cabin vanished from her senses. Cold air rushed through her mind. A forest she did not know flashed behind her eyes. Black banners, a throne room emptied of warmth, a man's voice, deep and strained, speaking from somewhere far away and painfully close. "Run before they find me." Emily stumbled back, gripping the table. Grim pressed against her side to steady her, his own body trembling with the force of whatever had passed between them. She stared at him, breath caught in her throat. "That was you," she whispered. His silver eyes met hers, no longer only wild, no longer only guarded. There was a person behind them, a trapped soul, a warning. Outside, the chapel bell rang again. Emily looked toward the village, then back at the wolf everyone wanted her to abandon. Her fear was real, sharp as winter air, but so was the truth blooming beneath it. Whatever Grim was, whoever was searching for him, he had asked her to run. Instead, Emily reached for her mother's old blue coat and said, "No, we are going together." By sundown, Silver Pine's moon court was full enough for the walls to sweat with candle heat and judgment. Emily walked through the main doors with Grim at her side, and every conversation died before she reached the center aisle. The great hall had always frightened her as a child. Its ceiling rose 3 stories above the stone floor, hung with old pack banners and polished antlers. Every shadow shaped like something watching. Tonight, it felt smaller than she remembered, not because she had grown braver, but because Grim moved beside her with the silent weight of a storm. No chain, no rope, no lowered head, just a dark gray wolf walking at an Omega's side as if the world had no right to separate them. The council sat in a crescent of high-backed chairs beneath the moon window. Mason Vale stood nearby with his arms folded, satisfaction already waiting on his face. Elder Rowan Pierce, the oldest member of the council, tapped his cane once against the floor. Emily Carter, "You were ordered here to answer for harboring an unidentified rogue inside Silverpine territory." Emily stopped on the white stone circle at the center of the hall. Grim stopped with her. She could feel the heat of him against her leg, steady and alive. "He was injured," she said. A murmur moved through the room. Mason stepped forward. "An injured threat is still a threat." His gaze dropped to Grim. "And that animal has no pack mark we recognize." Grim's ears angled back, but he did not growl, Emily noticed. He was choosing restraint for her. The realization made her stand a little straighter. Elder Pierce narrowed his pale eyes. "You risk the safety of this pack for a stray?" Emily's throat tightened, but her voice did not break. "No, I risked my comfort for a life everyone else had already decided was not worth saving." The hall went still. Somewhere in the back, someone gave a disbelieving laugh, but it faded quickly when Grim lifted his head. Moonlight slid through the tall window and touched the bandage on his shoulder. The linen glowed, silver first, then bright white, the crescent and 3 stars burning through the cloth like a secret tired of hiding. Gasps broke across the room. Mason took 1 step back. Elder Pierce rose halfway from his chair. "That mark," he whispered. The doors behind Emily opened with a heavy groan before anyone could answer. A line of royal guards entered the hall wearing black coats trimmed in silver, their faces solemn, their boots striking the stone in perfect rhythm. At their center walked a tall man with dark hair and eyes like winter moonlight. Every alpha in the room lowered their gaze. Every beta bowed. Even Mason seemed to forget how to breathe. Emily knew him from banners, from whispered warnings, from the royal seal stamped on every law Silverpine feared. Alpha King Nathan Hale Blackwood had come to Mooncourt, but his eyes were not on the council. They were not on the guards. The banners, or the stunned pack gathered in silence, they were fixed on Grim. The wolf stepped away from Emily for the first time since they had left the cabin. His body shimmered, not breaking, not vanishing, but becoming light around the edges. Silver mist rose from his fur and flowed across the floor toward the king. Emily watched, frozen, as Grim paused once and looked back at her. For one heartbeat, he was still her impossible, grumpy stray. Then the silver light crossed the room and entered Nathan's chest. The king staggered only half a step. When he opened his eyes again, the same fierce silver gaze looked out from a human face. The entire hall fell to its knees. Emily remained standing because she had forgotten how to move. Nathan looked at her across the silent court, and his voice carried like a vow. For 3 days, my wolf answered no throne, no crown, and no command. He stepped down from the royal dais, gaze never leaving hers. He answered only her. Nathan crossed the moon court with the quiet force of winter arriving early. No one moved. No one dared breathe too loudly. Emily stood alone in the white stone circle, her hands cold at her sides, still feeling the shape of Grim's absence beside her. The wolf was gone, but not gone. She could see him in the king's eyes, in the guarded tilt of his head, in the way Nathan looked at her as if he remembered every bowl of water, every quiet word, every moment she had chosen mercy when fear would have been easier. Elder Pierce lowered himself from his chair with effort, his face pale beneath the candlelight. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "we did not know the wolf belonged to you." Nathan stopped beside Emily, not in front of her, not behind her, but beside her. The small choice rippled through the hall like a second revelation. "No," he said, "you knew he was helpless. That should have been enough." The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Mason Vale dropped his gaze. But not before Emily saw anger flash across his face. The Omega concealed him from a lawful search. Mason said, forcing his voice steady, "She brought an unidentified creature into pack territory. Royal or not, she broke protocol." Emily felt the old instinct to apologize rise in her throat. Nathan turned his head, and the hall seemed to dim around him. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Protocol chained my wolf to a market post." Mason went silent. Nathan looked back at the council. 3 nights ago, a forbidden curse split my wolf spirit from my body during an ambush on the northern road. My guards found traces of royal magic near Silverpine, but not him. While trained warriors searched with banners and commands, Emily Carter found him with torn fur, a guarded heart, and every reason not to trust a soul in his pack. Emily's breath caught. She had never heard her name spoken like that before. Not as a burden, not as a problem, but as something worthy of being remembered. Nathan reached up and unclasped the black cloak from his shoulders. The fabric was lined in silver and marked with the Blackwood crest. Before Emily could step back, he placed it gently around her. Warmth fell over her like shelter. The hall stirred, shocked whispers rising from every corner. An Alpha King did not cover an accused Omega with his royal cloak unless he meant for the world to understand exactly where she stood. She did not steal what was royal, Nathan said. She saved what was dying. Emily looked up at him, unable to speak. Up close, he was not the monster from village stories. He was tired, powerful, controlled, and carrying a loneliness she recognized too well. Beneath all that command was the same guarded soul that had slept against her cabin wall, too proud to ask for comfort and too wounded to refuse it. Elder Pierce bowed his head. "What would you have us do, Your Majesty?" Nathan's gaze swept the room, stopping on every face that had laughed at Emily in the market. "Remember this," he said. "Rank is not proof of worth. Strength without mercy is only fear wearing a crown." Then he looked at Emily and the court. The candles and the watching pack seemed to fade behind the silver of his eyes. "And as for what belongs to whom," he said softly, My wolf made his choice before I ever had the chance. The silence after Nathan's words felt larger than the court itself. Emily stood beneath the weight of the royal cloak, surrounded by people who had once looked through her as if kindness made her invisible. Now every eye was fixed on her, not with laughter, not with pity, but with the uneasy awe of a pack realizing they had misjudged the quietest soul among them. Nathan turned toward her fully, and for the first time since entering the hall, the Alpha King looked less like a ruler carved from winter and more like the wounded wolf who had trusted her floor, her fire, and her trembling hands. "Emily Carter," he said, his voice low enough for her heart to hear before the court did. "My wolf chose you when I could not speak. He trusted you when he trusted no crown. He protected you because you protected him first." Emily's throat tightened. She thought of the market post, the mud on the quay, the cruel laughter, the little cabin half a mile from town, and Grim glaring from beneath her pantry floor like an offended prince among potatoes. A small, impossible smile touched her lips. Nathan saw it, and something warm broke through the guarded silver in his eyes. Then, before the council, the guards, and the entire Silverpine pack, he lowered himself to one knee. A wave of shock moved through the hall. Emily forgot how to breathe. Kings did not kneel to omegas. Alphas did not bow before girls who lived in weathered cabins and stitched old coats for coins. But Nathan did. He held out his hand, palm open, asking rather than taking. "I will not claim you like property," he said. "I will not command your answer. But if your heart allows it, stand beside me, not as a secret, not as a debt, as my fated mate, my equal, and the one my wolf already calls home." Emily looked at his hand. Then she looked at the pack that had once called her the stray keeper, as if loving unwanted things was something shameful. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The royal mark on his chest glowed beneath his shirt, and at the same moment, a soft silver crescent appeared on Emily's wrist, bright as moonlight and gentle as a promise. The court bowed, one by one, until even Mason Vale lowered his head. Emily did not feel taller because they bowed. She felt steadier because she had finally stopped measuring herself by eyes too small to see her. Nathan rose beside her, and outside the moon window, the night seemed to open over Silverpine like a new beginning. Sometimes the world teaches us to mistake gentleness for weakness, but Emily's story reminds us that mercy can be the bravest kind of strength. She did not save Grim because he was royal. She saved him because he was alone, hurt, and treated as if his life no longer mattered. That is the kind of love that changes kingdoms. Not loud love, not proud love, but steady love that stays when fear tells everyone else to walk away. In my opinion, the most powerful people are not always the ones with crowns, titles, or the loudest voices. Sometimes they are the quiet ones who still choose compassion after being mocked for it. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments, would you have opened your door for Grim? And if you believe kindness can reveal destiny, please subscribe and stay with us for the next story.